Welcome to the Age of Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Fission radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear. Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. This is Lonnie Clark with the Age of Fission radio show. Today is Wednesday, September 30th. I can't believe it's the 30th of September already. And as usual, on Wednesdays, we like to do interviews if we can line them up. So far, we've been successful at getting interviews lined up every Wednesday for you. Today, I have actually brought back Miriam Wells. Miriam, do you like to be called Miriam or Mimi?
Well, okay. Well, first of all, Miriam's Well was my band, so that's not what I want to be known as. My name is Mimi Gurman.
Mimi Gurman. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's really great to know. Thank you so much. And so I sort of joined forces with her, as I said before, the last time she was on with us. We were friends on Facebook. I didn't really know her, and she posted something about what's it going to take for us to get Columbia Generating Station closed down because it is a disaster in the waiting. We know it's going to be a massive disaster when something happens, not if. And we have really putting our heads together trying to figure out ways to get this, how we can get the community organized to put pressure on the utility companies to close down the Columbia Generating Station. She also has some really fabulous organizations. She has radcast.org, and on Facebook there's No Nukes Northwest. Radcast.org has been doing testing of seaweed and soils and things like that with a gamma spectrometer to see what the levels of radiation are up in the Portland area and I guess British Columbia and the Northwest area. And they have a new, what they really need right now and what they've decided that's really important is for us to understand what's in our food. And in order to do that, they need a much better quality gamma spectrometer. So we have put together an effort. I'm starting a GoFundMe page, and we're improving it every day. We'll be putting up a new video to improve the message a little bit more. I just put it up. But there is a gamma spectrometer that is quite expensive. And Miriam, do you want to talk about this a little bit more so that you can actually explain what it is, and then I'll lay the bombshell on them on how much it costs?
Yeah, this is a gamma spectroscopy is what is used to detect radioactivity in your food. You can't know this from a Geiger counter. A Geiger counter can tell you a lot of things, but it can't tell you what radionuclides are in your food and how hot your food is. So you need a gamma spectrometer in order to do that. We have one now that we got from an activist from Hawaii about 2 years ago. And we've been using that, but due to the software that goes with that, it's inferior to other lab tools that we would like. So we have detected, and we've been able to detect cesium 134 and 137 in some seaweed samples from Canada. So we know that it's working. It's just a question of getting better equipment so that we don't have to struggle quite as hard and quite as long and question, to the amount that we are questioning how accurate our readings are. And so anyway, that's why we need the next step up. And the next step up is what Lonnie will tell you about in a minute as far as the cost. These things can go from hours, which is around $2,000, to the next one that we want, to it can go all the way up to like $80,000 for these.
Wow.
We don't need the highest end. What RadCast does is with our samples that we receive, if we have questionable samples or samples that we see have cesium in it, we have a relationship with other labs in the United States that we can send our samples to once we have our own reading. And then they'll recheck our readings for us to make sure that what we're seeing is accurate before we tell you, the public, what's in it. And the other thing about RadCast, that's a great safety net for all of us to make sure that what RadCast is putting out is honest and truthful information. Yeah. The other labs will maybe tell you what their results are, or maybe not. Those labs are primarily owned and funded by the government or universities, which have a say in what they tell you. So if they don't want news to go out that your food is radiated and that you're eating radiation, then that lab can't tell you what it is. So those labs appreciate RadCast because we aren't tied to any of those secrecy groups. We are the lab for the people. And I stress that because we are the only lab for the people. We have zero ties to any government affiliation or any university or any organization that would try to silence us. So everything that we test, we tell you about. If we find any level of radiation, no matter how low, we will tell you that there is radiation and what amount we found. So those things are important to know because you guys listening only have one lab you can depend on, and it's RadCast.
Well, that's really great to know, Mimi. So let me get the amount that this costs. This is why we're having to put up a GoFundMe page. It is not a small amount. The total out the door for this, it's called the Model 970 Portable MCA Detector and SNAP Nuclear Spectrometer Software. And it will do everything that we need to do in order to figure out what level of radiation is in our food. The total cost without shipping, folks, is $5,864, which is why nobody in America can just go run out and buy one of these things to start figuring out what the radiation level is in their food.
And even if they could, even if somebody had tons of money, this is really complicated equipment. I work with somebody who understands the equipment, and even when my lab partner has issues with what he's finding, we do have these other scientists that we can go to from these other labs who will talk to us. They appreciate what we're doing and are there at the click of a email or a phone call to help us through what our questions are. So again, they really appreciate that we have the freedom to tell you what's going on because they actually want to. Some of these scientists want you to know the things that they know, but they can't tell you. So we have a lot of help on understanding the complexity of what we see in these lab tests.
That's kind of cool. It allows them to kind of be a whistleblower without being a whistleblower.
Exactly.
Because they're just confirming your third-party documentation. That's it. Well, I imagine that we'll probably have to figure out a system to get around that once the nuclear bastards realize what they're doing. But I guess that's down the road. Miriam, I have a question to ask you. When this product gets purchased and you start testing, is this going to be available for the general public, say, to mail a sample to RadCast or for the people in the Northwest, or what's the process? How are you guys planning on using it for the general public, and what will the cost be for this?
Well, right now we're doing everything for free. We do all samples for free because we really want to know what's going on. People get in touch with me through info@radcast.org, which is the email which goes to me.
Okay.
Again, it's info@radcast.org, and they tell me what it is they want to test, and I determine where they're located, and if they are, on the West Coast, your chances are a hell of a lot higher that we're going to want to see what you have. If you live near nuclear power, we're going to take your sample, push you to the front of the sample line. And we have done lots of soil tests early on so that we have a baseline from a year and a half ago of what soils look like from Portland, all over Portland, Seattle, south of Eugene, in Oregon, and also in BC. And I don't think we have any.
BC,
I can't remember.
British Columbia. Right?
Yeah, and I can't remember if we have soil samples from California or not. I'm not remembering that, so we might not. But we have a baseline of what healthier soils look like. At least, I shouldn't even say healthier. What the soils look like at that time. And so as we move forward, if those soil samples we see changes in them, well, we can put the story together with what we're reading in the lab. As far as food goes, we want to test food. We want to test fish. We want to test what's growing in your gardens. But you have to come to me through the email and let me know what it is you have and, where you live.
Well, can you actually test the food? Is this a machine where you can actually put the food in a machine and it figures out the radiation inside the food?
You bet.
Wow. And so this is an interesting thing. You said something just now that really piqued my interest. If a person, it sounds like to be really effective in figuring out where we're really at in terms of exposure to radiation, when a person gets involved in sending you information or a piece of food or some soil for testing, it's probably a good idea to have it tested like every 6 months or once a year or on a regular basis so we can start building a database for that particular area, correct?
That's right, and that's one of the things that we're working on.
Wow. Honestly, when Fukushima happened, it never occurred to me that I would have to get an education in chemistry and have to really begin to even understand and comprehend what this stuff means because of the corruption and the, for these lab scientists who desperately want to get the information out, for them to be able to sustain their lives and value their education and the work that they do, they have to keep their trap shut while they allow people to get poisoned, essentially. I mean, the level of collusion is off the charts. It's really unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a whole system of secrecy which causes death. And
yes.
One of the things that we're seeing today and yesterday, and it's not the first time. It's just the first time that we're really seeing it out in the open. Is what has been going on at San Onofre, where they found that after the closure of San Onofre, there are radioactive pieces of equipment all along the San Onofre acreage, along the I-5 corridor, and one of the things that was most interesting to me, which has to do with what we're talking about, is that the levels of radiation are so high along the I-5 corridor that the nuclear regulatory inspectors refused to perform routine radiation surveys. The reason for that is that if they know how hot an area is, how radioactive an area is, and they don't tell you, then they're in deep shit for not telling you if anyone ever cared in another regulatory format that had control over the NRC. But there isn't one, so it doesn't really matter. It makes it all moot because nobody has control over the NRC or the DOD or the DOE or anything else.
Or anything related. Honestly, the whole nuclear industry is the sloppiest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. This whole thing was put together way back in order to build the bombs. It was put together without having any clue how where they were going to where they were going to put the radioactive waste, how many people were going to get killed. Nobody cared about this stuff because they had one mission, which was to create a bomb. And no matter how that was going to happen, that's what was going to happen. And that is what happened. And then they used the bomb, and millions of people have died, since all of this, with all of the bomb testing, with all of the plants that have been leaking, with all of the meltdowns that we've had, including the dropping of the bombs in Japan. We've had millions of people. We had over 1 million people just from Chernobyl, who have died. And what you'll read is there's only been 143,
right?
Like 143 people.
Right. Well, the other thing that's left out of those statistics is all the species that have been decimated, and really, the planet is in a 6th level extinction because I believe specifically because of the nuclear. When you overlay when the species started dying off, they started dying off pretty much 10 years after the nuclear industry just started to go full steam ahead and without regard to life on this planet whatsoever. It is really beyond a crime against humanity. It is a crime against planet Earth. It's ecocide. And, this is why I'm on the radio 3 times a week and talk. Honestly, it's the most egregious thing I've ever heard of in my life. And I am just dumbfounded that people shake their head, say, yeah, it's bad, there's nothing. We have the power if we just assert ourselves. That's the amazing, amazing thing. And if people do not understand this, like we're talking about us, creating pressure to close the Columbia generating station. And I said this to you.
Or any nuke plant near you, wherever you are.
Or stop the new ones that are being built. But this is the interesting thing. And I said this to you before we went on the air, for a few minutes before we went on the air, that I really think this thing in San Onofre really spells it out very deeply about one of the reasons they push hard against us for closing any nuclear power plant. Because once it's closed down, it comes under different kind of scrutiny, and there's different people that can get in. The system they have to change systems. Like they've been running the system for 20 years. Everybody knows the rules. Everybody knows how to cover up. And then once it's closed down, it changes hands, changes systems, and all of a sudden there's the possibility for whistleblowers and leaks to get out about what a catastrophic wreck it is. And then they have to cover their tracks like they're doing now in San Onofre. It's quite astounding, actually. And when you think about it, I mean, I would be very curious to find out from the people. Wasn't it Pilgrim that was closed up last year? And so
Pilgrim is in the death throw right now. Chances are that Pilgrim very, very soon is going to start their shutdown, which is awesome. The fight is enormous, and we are winning. So that's some really good news. It hasn't happened quite yet, but it's looking like that one's about to go.
Well, I'll bet you 2-1 when that one closes down. I bet $1 million that when it closes down, we are going to see the same kind of stories leaking out. Radioactive equipment shoved here, shoved there. The community has been exposed. The environment has been exposed. The entire culture of the nuclear industry is really one of complete disregard for human life and the threat of nuclear radioactivity. It's astounding, but that's the reality.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of the things I'd like to talk to you about before I let you go this morning is really remind our listeners to why, here specifically in the Northwest, why it's super urgent that we get actively engaged at calling what we can do to put pressure on the utility companies and now Louisa said it is up to us to call, like we should call our congressman, we should call like Pete DeFazio's office and force our Congress people to close down these plants, especially up there at Columbia Generating Station, because of the lie that they lied about the fact that there was, on their application, they didn't disclose the fact that they knew there was an earthquake fault. That she said that alone is enough to.
It's 12 fault lines.
Yes, but from what I understood, they knew about one.
Yeah, they didn't. They pushed the relicensing through years early, and the geology team at University of Washington created a new earthquake fault line map, and part of the reason for them getting the relicensing early was that the UW team and their findings, everything was so close together that if they could get the relicensing done first, then you could keep it undercover with the whole new reality of the fault lines. So we've been pushing at the information about the fault lines to our government, our Oregon state government. But, I think that Louise is right. The more people who call and continue to hound our senators and reps about this, the better. But will it do anything? I don't know. I still think it's worth doing. I definitely think it's worth doing, because if they don't think anybody knows about it, right, then they're not going to deal with it anyway, know?
Right. Well, this is why the nuclear industry is actually spending so much money making an effort to convince people that radiation is just not that bad for us, that hormesis is really the key to the living in the new age of fission, that as long as we don't worry about it, it's not going to affect us that much. They're spending boatloads of money on this, because if people really were to take it, this is why whenever just yesterday somebody said to me, well, you don't believe that Fukushima is actually affecting the ocean. You obviously have no concept how big the ocean is. Actually, I do have a concept how big the ocean is. I do know how gigantic it is, but we also have never had four nuclear reactors in total China syndrome meltdown, where one, they just recently disclosed there's no nuclear fuel in there. It's bone dry, which means it's all in the ocean. And it's spewing out radiation still to this day, almost 5 years later, into the Pacific Ocean. How any scientist can say that is not going to cause severe damage to the ocean is beyond comprehension to me. I just don't comprehend that.
Yeah, it's already caused severe damage, and it's just going to get exponentially worse as time goes on, because there is no end time for this plume. They like to tell you that the plume has a beginning and an end, and that the beginning of the plume has hit the West Coast. Well, that's true. But there is no end of the plume. There is no end of the plume. It is a constant, major leaking faucet out of Fukushima. And we're talking the faucet is leaking a minimum of 300 to 600 tons of radioactive water into the ocean a day, a minimum. And that amounts to, in radioactivity, this is a big number, folks, it amounts to 300 becquerels of cesium-134 and 137 and strontium-90. These things are so deadly, these radionuclides, and that's what's pouring into the ocean every single day, and there is no end. The things that Arnie Gunderson has put out to Japan to do, as far as trenching and building walls and doing all kinds of things that would be something to do to help prevent the cascade of water that comes down the hill from going through the melted core into the ocean, would be a plus. But Japan doesn't want to hear anything. So this is a real big problem. And now the samples that we're receiving from Vancouver, or north of Vancouver, in their seaweed, every single sample has cesium-134, which is the name tag. That is the defining name tag of Fukushima radiation. And 137, and cesium-137. So, it's in our food now.
It's in our food.
The only way to know what is going on, and I'm serious when I say this, the only way to know what's going on now is through RadCast.
That's true, and we really, we're going to keep this GoFundMe page up until we get to the goal. It'll be about $6,000, $5,864, and if we had 600 people giving $100, you could buy it immediately, and that's not that many people, considering we have billions of people in millions of people in America that really are exposed, and especially on the West Coast. I mean, this is something, frankly, that's near and dear, it should be, to all of our hearts. And it is really, honestly, the only way. Our government is not testing the food. They're not adequately testing the food.
They're not testing the food.
Yeah.
Period.
Not only are they not testing, but they are also importing food from Fukushima. It's just completely insane. So,
and when Lonnie says they're importing from Fukushima, this is really a truism. Fukushima is now extending their dairy farms in Fukushima Prefecture, which is the most radiated site right now that you could be in, aside from nuclear dumps around the world. And there are two. One is at Hanford and one is in Russia. And as far as like the levels of radiation that you would get if you just kind of walk in those areas, Fukushima is so highly radioactive, and they're extending their dairy farm in Fukushima. Now, these cows have cancer. So
the cows have cancer, and they're giving
everything that's there is cancer causing. The grass, the soil, it's laden with plutonium in their soil. And they are exporting their dairy from the Fukushima Prefecture. I can't even say this enough. This is the most insane thing this is like the Mengele experiments from the Nazi era. What happens if we export dairy from Fukushima with plutonium? Forget cesium, strontium, and 100 other radionuclides. Plutonium. And let's give it to the world.
Now, specifically the United States, because most of the world won't take it. That's the insane part. Most of the world will not take it. The United States, Hillary Clinton went over there and promised the Prime Minister we would not test for radiation, and we do not. And that is specifically the and green tea and rice. Those are the things that I've read and peaches. Their fruit is coming in. So it's really, it's beyond insanity. And this is why it really is important for us to really support the RadCast lab, because it is the lab for the people. And this piece of equipment is super vital, because we really need to understand the government is not going to tell us. In fact, they do every single thing they can to not tell us. They did not tell us that making nuclear bombs and having nuclear energy created nuclear waste. They did not tell us that for 20 years. They did science experimentations on us before they started building the reactors, had accumulated massive amounts of waste, knew they did not know what to do with it, and did not tell the public about the waste for 20 years. That same mentality is still operating really exponentially at the government level. And it has everybody. I do not understand. I mean, the threats to life must be very real, because you start talking about radiation to your congressmen and senators, and their knees start shaking and quivering. So the level of threat must be very extreme to them. Obviously, the nuclear industry has no problem murdering people. So any legislator, any attorney...
They don't have a problem murdering themselves. Killing themselves. It's a massive suicide mission on their part for themselves as well. I'm going to have to go in a minute because my dog needs to go outside. But I also wanted people to understand the reason that RadCast needs money from the people is that labs that I've mentioned before, they get their equipment through money from the government and from universities that they are aligned with. We have none of that. So if the people want to know what is going on in their food, and we sure hope that you want to know because I want to know, we need your help in getting this gamma spectrometer. So I hope that you all understand the importance of it and the devotion of RadCast to give you the results and look, into these samples. And I hope that you can. Everything helps. We only need a finite amount of money. So, Lonnie's going to take care of things as far as the GoFundMe page. And if you want to get in touch and you have questions, you can always get in touch with me at info@radcast.org. Lonnie, thank you so much.
I really appreciate your time and your explanation. You're an extremely valuable resource, Mimi. I hope that I can get you back on the radio. I really want to have you back so we can keep hammering down on this until we close the Columbia Generating Station, I'm going to keep hammering on it, because we are really, it's really an example of how we really need to actively engage and fight back against the nuclear industry. It starts in our own hometowns, in our own little areas, with our own little nuclear power plants, and I really appreciate your efforts.
Well, thanks very much.
Okay, well, look, I'll talk to you soon then.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Hey, folks, that was such a great interview. She's always so informative. This is why I love having her on, because she really, really, really understands she's been an anti-nuke activist, really, since the 70s. She's one of those activists that stopped nuclear power plants on the East Coast. She's helped stop Trojan. She's been seriously, actively engaged in anti-nuclear activism for when I was raising my kids and had no idea that the nuclear power was actually a threat, you know. One of the things I really did want to talk about this morning that is really serious is this idea that if, you know, this information about San Onofre is explosive on its own. Just the fact that, you know, we know that they've been hiding things. But I cannot impress this upon everybody who listens to this radio station. If you think that they are going to be disclosing any of the problems that they've done in your own particular area, you've got another thing coming. Liars lie. That's kind of the bottom line. When a liar perpetrates a lie, they have to lie all the way down the line. And that is exactly, and they actually pretty much increase their lies. Once they start lying, they just start creating this whole story that never really, you know, couldn't even be possible. Same thing has happened here down in San Onofre. My guess would be it's going to be at every single power plant. I think the reason that they will fight us hard to close the Columbia Generating Station is for that very reason. Once it's closed down, we are going to discover there is radiation all over the place. And it's kind of unconscionable. I don't know if, you know, I'm sure that many of you are watching the news, but they're starting this whole thing up of making Russia the enemy, surrounding this whole thing with Syria. Most people are not aware that the United States is actually dropping depleted uranium weapons on a regular basis. Those are our weapons of choice now. And you know why those are our weapons of choice? Because we have so much nuclear waste that we don't know what to do with it. You know, when they first started making the nuclear waste, there's been proposals to put it into our silverware, into our pots and pans, into our dishes. Let's just add it to everything, and it won't be so much of a problem. The issue is the knowledge of these scientists is really limited in terms of nuclear energy. They can make it, but they don't know how to stop it. And so we are living with the net results of these monsters. We really are their lab rats, folks. And if we want to get out of the lab and get out of the cage, we have to get out of our houses and we have to get active. And I know many people have contacted me and said, it's a waste of time to contact your elected officials. You know what? This is how I feel about it. If 1 million people contacted our elected officials, we would get action. The fact is, this radio station, I don't know how many thousands of people listen to it, obviously not enough, because if we had millions of people listening to this radio station, the nuclear industry would be closed down yesterday, because we could be actively engaged, and they would be scared shitless of us. They're not scared of us, folks. That's the issue. They're not scared of us. We're scared of them. I'm not really scared of them, to be honest. They want me to be scared of them. I have been attacked on my own channel. I just block people. I don't let any negative statements come into my life, to be honest. But, you know, they make remarks like, you obviously don't know anything about the ocean. You don't understand physics. Well, yeah, we understand physics enough to understand that John Goffman's work stands on its own. None of John Goffman's work that he wrote in the 70s and 80s in an effort, he'd made a valiant effort. He was alone. Him and Arthur Tamplin and Linus Pauling stood alone against the military. in large proportions. And, Helen Caldecott got involved. They were able to slow the train down. But, man, when the big money rolled out, the nuclear cartel, what did I say on Monday? They are 8, 9, 10, 11 nuclear power plants they want to start in the United States. And the ironic part is I haven't really done this, but it occurred to me when I looked at it after the show, and I'm going to do it for next week, is overlay the nuclear power plants with where all the fracking sites are. So this is the lack of cohesive thinking. All these people see is the big money dollars, like this scientist that works with Mamie in these labs that say, yeah, send us your samples. We really want to tell the people, but we can't because we have jobs. If those people that work for those labs refuse to work there, then those labs would have to change their policies because they need people to work there. We can't just be complicit with the lies. It's kind of like when I kind of got angry at Caleb for wanting to go into the military, right? If we refuse to participate with them, then they cannot expand what they're doing. And this is the hard problem. And when Thomas Ackerman talks about it's conscience, we have to act on our conscience. These people working in those labs know that they're lying to people. They have to go home and lie to people and lay in their beds at night and think about the millions of people who are being exposed to radiation, just like these guys out here at San Onofre. Well, let's see, who does they say that they are? Let me pull up some names at the San Onofre story, because really let's see, I'll just read it straight from the story on ENE News. Former San Onofre safety officer Vinrod Arora said there's an indication of this is an indication of the mentality and the culture at the time of songs. Said the plant grounds of their subcontractors. Be very careful of the goods they accept from Edison with the blessings of the NRC. So, we know that the NRC is really just a rubber stamp for anything the nuclear industry wants to do. It's seriously unconscionable, folks, that the NRC, and really maybe that's what we really need to do, is start humiliating these people, calling them up and, writing them on a regular basis and demanding action. When I started paying attention to this a few years ago, I never really realized how many people have been nonstop, actively engaged in shutting down the nuclear power plants. And it is stunning that the forces of money can push back against the thousands of people. We need millions of people. When Songs was closed, Kevin went down there and he participated in the hearings. And there was like some thing on television where it had all the people who had actively engaged in shutting down Songs. And they were standing on this stage, and there was probably, I don't know, maybe 50 or 100 people. Now, I lived in Los Angeles most of my life. I moved up to Oregon 10 years ago. And when I was driving back and forth from San Diego to Los Angeles to visit my family, hundreds of times, never once occurred to me that that was a nuclear power plant. I say to the people that are the activists, that's our job. It's like, I feel like now it's my job in the Northwest to let all my neighbors know that we have a nuclear power plant 10 miles away from Hanford. A lot of the people in Eugene, Oregon are not even aware of it. On my YouTube channel, Nuts for Art, I do interviews with people and I ask them 3 basic questions. What do you know about Fukushima? What do you know about Hanford? And what do you know about nuclear? And it is a lot of people will not answer those questions. They feel they don't want to do the interview because they feel like I'm setting them up. They're like, well, what do you mean? I don't know. They feel like we have been, basically force-fed here, the bullshit lies, so that when someone asks us about it, we click in our brain, we feel completely inadequate. And that, again, folks, goes back to the social engineering. That's exactly how they want us all to feel, like we're just too dumb to really comprehend what these things are. And we just don't understand it, and it's really not up to us to ask the questions. Silly little people, we're the useless feeders, I guess, that we just can't comprehend it all. And it's really imperative that every person listening to this radio station figure out a way to get actively engaged to stop the crimes against humanity. And I don't know what that means in terms of, I'm kind of like this. I'm just throwing spaghetti against the wall. I'm doing whatever I can. I took this opportunity to be on the radio 3 times a week, which frankly, most of my friends were shocked that I'd be willing to get up and ready for 8 o'clock in the morning 3 times a week, because anyone who knows me knows that I don't even start my office. I don't even open my office till 10 o'clock. So this is something that is at a visceral level. I can't even begin to tell you how deeply this has affected my entire being. Understanding, I've been living under the threat of the nuclear bombs since I was a child. When we were in kindergarten, we used to hide under our desks, and they would push the desks together, and we'd have like these nuclear, tests. What would we do in the event of a nuclear bomb, right? We always had these testing threats. A lot of the younger people don't even remember those things, but most of my childhood, up until probably I was in 7th grade or 8th grade, several times a year we had nuclear bomb practices where we had to shove our desks together and get under there and hide for 5 minutes, and then the teachers would come and tell us that everything was fine and that we all did really good, and in the event of a nuclear bomb, we would all be protected and don't worry about it. And in retrospect, really, in the event of a nuclear bomb, we'd all be super screwed. That's the real reality, just like the people in Fukushima. I am still seriously heartbroken over the towns in Fukushima that have been forced to move back in 12 miles away from the nuclear power plant within 5 years of it exploding. And it's not like it's even been fixed. This is the completely outrageous thing. It is worse than ever, folks. Like, they're now telling us that there's absolutely no spent fuel in one of the power plants, completely bone dry. If you follow if you go to the YouTubes and you look at their Fukushima Daiichi news feeds, you can actually see the radiation sort of on the film. I mean, it is worse than ever. They put coverings around the nuclear power plants so nobody would be reminded of how completely horrible they are. They put up a big propaganda thing telling us they'd taken out all the spent fuels from number 4. No, they haven't. There was no spent fuels in those number 4s. I mean, that thing blew up. It was really in a bad place. It got completely washed away. One of the things that this is really interesting, I'm hoping that in the next couple of weeks I can have Dana Durnford come on the radio show and give me some interviews about his expeditions for life along the British Columbia coast. Dana is not a scientist. He did the best he could. He did what he thought was the most important thing that he could do. He took pictures. He has documented the coast. He went out in... Honestly, the guy's got some courage to be, and I applaud him so much. Dana has a YouTube channel called Beautiful Girl by Dana. Every night there's a live feed at 6 o'clock, or 8 o'clock, I beg your pardon. It's at 8 o'clock. Most nights I think he does a live feed. And it allows all of us, we call ourselves Fuku fighters, to get together, talk about things that are happening. We can type in. It's a live stream on YouTube. It's extremely helpful. And he's showing us the thousands of pictures that he's taken. And everything that he says confirms exactly what Mimi told us this morning, that, yes, there is cesium, definite markers along the British Columbia, all up in British Columbia. Dana Durnford took his little skiff that was purchased through crowdfunding. I actually contributed to it myself. There's a site, he's got a website called the nuclearproctologist.org, or you could just Google his name, Dana Durnford, Durnford, and you'll find the nuclear proctologist. But he took this little skiff. It's like a little, I don't know, it's not even a boat with a hard shell. It's got like these, I don't know what you call them, but they've got like plastic things, you know. It looks like a little catamaran with a thing stuck in the middle. And he took it up the coast of British Columbia, 800 miles, and documented it in the worst of weather and in good weather and in the worst of weather. He stuck to it no matter what. And he's made 5 separate journeys to document the entire coast up and down the whole Canadian coast, 800 miles up. And he used to be a professional diver, so he was used to what the coast looked like. He has shown us pictures of what he took personally when he was working, where you see these magnificent colors of sea stars and sea urchins and different kelp and all this gigantic different flora along the coastline of Canada. As he took his boat along, it was really devastating to look at how barren it is up there. Very little life, very little activity, few birds, some whales. I mean, remember that it was reported there was only one baby orca born this year that has looked like it survived. So the West Coast is being hammered by nuclear radiation, period. Last night on my YouTube channel, Nuts for Art, that's NUTZFORART, I'm reading John Goffman's book. It's called Poison Power. It's the second book of his I'm reading on my YouTube channel. And I probably read 5, 6, maybe 10 pages. I think the consensus is we're trying to figure out with my subscribers what's the length of time to read. Somebody said they like 20-minute readings, so I think I'm going to go back to the 15, 20-minute readings. I've been keeping them at 10 minutes, which gives me about 6 pages to read a night. Last night, my passage, John Goffman was explaining what happens in fish with the radiation in the oceans. This is really fascinating. The fish need potassium, but their bodies can't absorb it. So what their metabolism does is it metabolizes the potassium 1,000 times greater than what it is in the water. So they're swimming through the water and they need this potassium, but they can't absorb it enough. So their metabolism absorbs the potassium at a rate of 1,000 times normal than, say, we do. We absorb the potassium as it comes in. They can't. So the cesium-137 is very similar to potassium. There's a lot of similar types of radionuclides, potassium, cesium. It kind of seemed to be, he listed a whole bunch of them. It seemed to be all the ones that ended with IUM were all sort of similar. So because Fukushima is pouring out radiation, the cesium-134, cesium-137 into the Pacific Ocean at rates that are off the charts, this is why the tuna presented with 100% of the tuna tested, the fish that they have tested off the coast of Japan from the Pacific Ocean have all been testing positive for radiation. The reason is because they identify the little fishes in the ocean when they're absorbing the cesium. If they were just being exposed to the cesium on their skin, it would not affect them. But what happens is a fish absorbs the cesium and multiplies the levels of radiation. It absorbs it at a rate of 1,000 times higher than is normal. So the fish is far more toxic to eat than, say, drink. If you had a cup of tainted, contaminated water and you had a fish, it's better to drink the water than to eat the fish because the fish has 1,000 times more of the radiation. That same thing is also true what's going on with these dairy cows. And I don't know if many of you remember this, but President Kennedy, 3 months before he got shot, coinky dinky, made a speech that said that he was going to close down the nuclear industry because the threat of contamination was just too great. There had been many stories. We had our very first nuclear explosion in Los Angeles. And it looks as if it was almost semi-intentional. Somebody sent me a story recently that kind of indicated that it was done intentionally so they could kind of like a little Mengele experiment to see how the radiation affected the people and the populace. They ended up selling that facility to a private industry, and now it's built all around Chatsworth. There's a whole city and a town sitting on top of the first nuclear site that ever happened in the United States. Well, in that area, in the Los Angeles area, and in fact, I grew up in Hacienda Heights, which is a suburb of Los Angeles. Across the street from me was a kid that got polio, and I can't help but wonder if he got the polio as an offshoot of the nuclear radiation. But I digress. So the thing is about this whole nuclear stuff is they are not going to tell us. They are not going to tell us when bad things happen. In fact, they will do everything they can, because that's their method. That's how they've decided. It's what John Goffman calls the 90% rule, right? Underreport that radiation causes harm, which is what they're doing now with the hormesis theory, and underreport the negative activity by 90%. So basically, they underreport the negative reactions that our bodies have to radiation by 90% and deny that radiation causes harm. So it's super important that we actively engage and find out in our own little neck of the woods the level of contamination that we are in danger to. Because radiation does not just cause cancer. Radiation causes tumors, skin rashes, it causes sterility, it causes genetic deformities. It basically messes with our DNA. And, you know, our future children, like the children in Chernobyl, are just now beginning to present with really negative effects. A lot of the teenagers who were exposed in Chernobyl are sterile, could not have children, or they had children with autism, or children with really severe negative effects, you know, birth defects of learning disabilities and things like that. All of that is being covered up. All of it is being covered up because the International Atomic Energy Agency was formed in 1957, joined the UN in 1957, and in 1959 they joined a joint agreement with the World Health Organization that said, they signed a contract that said that they would cooperate and not publish anything that harmed the other's industry. So the way the whole system was set up was just really to be shrouded in secrecy, because the IAEA has authority over the World Health Organization to censor and suppress any information or any scientific studies that they produce. So now we have a World Health Organization where many doctors come and go, and they go because they are super frustrated over the censorship and the suppression of vital information to public health and safety, which is why now we have the independent WHO, which you can find on the internet. It's www.independentwho.org. And you can do your own research and find out. Unfortunately for us folks, we are in a position, if we want to survive as humans, if we want to help the human species and animals and plants on this planet maintain their fitness as a species on our planet, and by fitness I mean scientific fitness, means the ability to reproduce and the ability to survive. So we need to be able to survive, we need to be able to reproduce. The nuclear contamination that we have on our planet must be neutralized. We must demand that science, A, stop producing nuclear waste, B, pour their money into finding solutions to neutralize the fissionable products that's happening, the increasing rates of radiation all over the planet, and we need to have medical support for the people who are being affected negatively by this. I mean, there is still lots of money to be made. So, you know, it's incomprehensible to me that the people who are running this industry have zero regard for life on our planet. They are watching the whales wash up. They are watching the seals, you know, die and starve. There's, you know, the salmon. What are they saying now about the salmon up in the Columbia River? More than half of it, they poured in new fish, but more than half of it when they pull it out, they've all got tumors and yick all over them, and which is why we need this gamma spectrometer, because basically what they do is they clean them up as best they can, pack them up and ship them. And whatever we don't know won't hurt us, When the milk was causing the children from the nuclear fallout in the very first nuclear explosion that happened in Los Angeles, high rates, extremely high rates of childhood diseases was off the charts in Los Angeles. That is what got the government's attention. That's what made John F. Kennedy say, we're going to shut down the nuclear power plants. Because there were so many sick children, the negative effects of radiation in the Los Angeles area from that catastrophe, for which we were really just laid bare. They made no effort to protect. It wasn't even covered for a very long time. It was really catastrophic. The sloppiness, the lack of information, that is really the entire method of operation of the nuclear industry. Because if everybody's sloppy, see, it's kind of like, what do they call it? Plausible deniability, right? So if everybody's polluting everywhere, they can point the fingers at each other. You can't exactly say. In fact, every person who you talk to, any quote scientist or any quote doctor, will tell you can't tell where radiation comes from. It's impossible to know where the cancer comes from. We can't tell if you're getting cancer from Fukushima or if you're getting it from the uranium mine or if you're getting it from the coal mine in your city. The fact is, we know that it's industrial pollution that is killing us. And the industrialists need to take responsibility for their actions and for murdering the planet. I put up a little video with my friend Louisa Hamachek, who created this map called the Nuclear Northwest. These types of maps are super valuable. This was unbelievable, but I had no idea that on the West Coast, right above Seattle, is where we keep all of our nuclear submarines, nor did I know that the closed down Trojan site is now a nuclear waste dump site. Nor did I know that right on the border of Idaho and Oregon, let's see, it's right inside of Idaho, actually, right against the mountains, is the Navy nuclear site. So the whole Northwest is just chock full of potential disaster, which is in the making. We know it's coming. Look at San Onofre. All these nuclear power plants are collapsing. So I still encourage everyone, let us contact our congressman. My congressman is Pete DeFazio, and I will be calling him again. I have called him, and I'm going to keep calling him. And from my understanding with Louisa, that is really the Congress has more power. I'm not so sure that's true. I'm still going to call Ron Wyden and Jeff Merkley, poke them in the eye. They don't like to talk to me. Ron Wyden's office will actually block my phone calls. He's still going to hear from me. I don't care. Contact your utility boards, you guys. Find out who they are. I contacted my utility board member, left him a message. I have not heard back from him, but I did air my opinions. We really need to put public pressure on these people. I mean, we need thousands. I venture to say if we got 50,000 people to take action, we could probably get some good results. So if there's 1,000 people here listening to this radio show, by just the sheer numbers of it, when you think about network marketing, if you get 3 people to contact 3 people to contact 3 people, we are going to have a lot of people calling up the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, our congressmen, our elected officials. So I will talk with you guys soon, and we'll have call-in Friday. On Friday, I hope to hear from everybody. Take care, you guys. And put your courage feet on.